I'd like to welcome all of you for coming. I know it's kind of a dreary day and it's a Monday morning. It's not easy to kind of get it together to come out here, but we appreciate your participation. So my name is Marcia Brown, professional occupational therapist for the blind. So they go into your home and they evaluate what tasks you're having difficulty doing. For example, if you're having difficulty using the microwave, using appliances, then we'll mark your appliances with these little tactile bump dots. I use them myself. Get up in the middle of the night, say you want to heat something in the microwave, but you can't see it, so you mark this appliances for the numbers, and then you can just push it. Some of the other things we do is we give out, in many cases, like adaptive kitchen equipment, or tell you where you can purchase it. For example, we didn't bring any with us, but we have these black and white cutting boards so that if you're cutting an onion, you can put it on the black side. If you're cutting something dark, you can put it on the other side. And all kinds of little nifty little gadgets like vibrating liquid level indicators so that you could put it in there, and when the coffee goes up near the top, it'll vibrate or it'll give off an audible sound. So this is just some of the services that we offer, and one thing I did want to say too is that we do have volunteer services in our agency, and they don't do anything like home healthcare aids, but depending on where you live and the availability, they will come in and help you read your mail, do some personal shopping, maybe provide transportation on a limited basis. So that's our agency. So I'm going to ask you that if you have any questions that you hold them until the end. I think that will be easier because this is being taped. So without further ado then, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker here, Randy Kirsch from the Hearing Loss Association of America, the Eastern chapter, which is down in Norwich.
In Stores.
Stores. How could I forget that? No, okay. Well, Randy's going to talk to you about the types of hearing loss. He's going to tell you his situation. He's going to give you some helpful hints. And then the agenda also includes some information on technology and what's in your resource packet. So here's Randy.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
As Marcia said, my name is Randy Kirsch. I'm from the Hearing Loss Association of America, Eastern Connecticut chapter. The Hearing Loss Association of America is a national support group for people with hearing loss. And I found it, I've been a member since 1998, and I found it to be very helpful. I started dealing with my hearing loss in 1990, realized at that point I had a problem, and went to an ENT doctor and got a hearing test, and he said, well, you need a hearing aid. So I got a hearing aid. There's three different, thank you very much. He told me I needed a hearing aid. A year later, I got a hearing aid, and I coasted along for about 6 or 7 years with that hearing aid until it wasn't really working all that well for me at that point in time. And I went to an otosclerosis, an otolaryngologist who is an ear doctor that specializes in the ears. And he said, well, gee, we need to do some tests. And he did some blood work, and he did an MRI, and determined that I had some tumors in on my nerves that were causing my hearing loss. I have a genetic condition that's referred to as neurofibromatosis type 2, and it allows tumors to grow on your central nervous system. So I had one on each side, and I've got one on my optical nerve as well. Fortunately, that one's not growing at this point. It's been pretty inactive. So in 1997, I had the tumor removed and got an implant in 1998. That initial implant didn't work so well, and I had it taken out, and they put a different one in, which was better than being completely deaf, which I was at that point in time. It did provide some environmental sounds and so forth. And then about 5 years or so ago, I got an implant on the other side. And that one, they lift the nerve in place and threaded the electrode around the tumor to get into my cochlea with these implants. Cochlear implants, the name implies that they're going to put an electrode in your cochlea. And your cochlea is the seashell kind of thing inside your ear. It's lined with hair stem cells and sound waves stimulate those hair cells so that your brain knows what the noise is that you're hearing. And that's how implants work. But the point is, you really need a support group to uncover all the tricks and secrets about hearing loss. I found it to be very helpful, and you still need to go to an audiologist and have it evaluated so you know what steps to take next. And thirdly, there are types of hearing loss that are caused by nerve damage, and again, it can be an age-related nerve problem that spreads and affects your hearing. It's called sensorineural hearing loss, which again, it's a nerve type hearing loss. Any damage to your auditory nerve that goes through your ear structure can be a real problem. You need to really do something about hearing loss. The general feeling in the community is that it takes people about 7 years to finally admit to the fact that they have hearing loss. And you really don't need to wait that long. There's an article that's circulating on Facebook right now that's entitled "Glasses Are Cool, Hearing Aids Are Not." And a lot of the hang up with people, and I had the same thing. When I got my first hearing aid, I stuck it in my ear, turned it on. I thought I was good to go. I went to work, and at the beginning of the day, there was an office meeting, so we're sitting in a conference room around a big table, and the guy across the table from me looks at me and like, "What's that in your ear?" I go, "Oh gosh," I was ready to crawl under the table. I didn't need that on the first day. I had this thing in my ear. So, yeah, you gotta bite the bullet. But the benefit that you're gonna get is tremendous. It really is. My hearing loss, as I said, deteriorated to the point where I was totally deaf for about 4 or 5 years before I was able to come upon somebody who could help me restore my hearing. Regardless of how bad your hearing might get, there are a wealth of options out there for treating your hearing loss. They can take it from my situation of being totally deaf and giving me back. I'm able to understand about 80 or 90% of what people say to me now. So to me, I think that's pretty remarkable with the technology and the advancements that have been made over the last 20, 25 years or so. Cochlear implants there's probably about 500,000 people that have been implanted with cochlear implants, both adults and children. So they're not as prevalent, and hearing aids are much more prevalent. And the strides that have been made with hearing aids are really likewise tremendous. The technology today is just unbelievable. There are all kinds of ways that you can hook your smartphone to your hearing aid and be able to control your hearing aid, the volume and the sensitivity of it and so forth with your smartphone. They all have Bluetooth capabilities for the most part today, so that if you want to talk to somebody on your cell phone, you just turn the switch on with the Bluetooth, or and be able to have a conversation with somebody without actually talking in the phone and struggling to hear through a cell phone. They don't always have the best microphones and speakers, so sometimes those get kind of garbled and a lot of static, and that kind of thing makes it difficult. There is one particular type of technology that I want to mention to you. You know, with the increase in technology for hearing aids, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. The problem with these real small hearing aids is that they don't have enough room for a little electrode that's called a T-coil. It's an electrode that's wrapped in copper wire, and they put it in your hearing aid, and you can activate that electrode with a switch on the outside of your aid. And that helps you to pick up sound through a magnetic wave. And a lot of audiologists, hearing aid dealers, unfortunately, are not totally familiar with this little piece of device, little piece of technology themselves. So they don't always tell you about it. But if you are going to get a hearing aid, get one with a T-coil if you have more than just a mild or a moderate hearing loss. It will allow you to connect with a telephone. Any landline phone, you can pick it up, flip the switch, and you're going to hear the speaker from the other end of the phone, just like he was talking directly into your ear, standing right beside you. So these magnetic waves pick up that sound, and they just put it right in your head, and it's really, really very beneficial. There are also loops. Your auditorium over here is looped, and that's based on the same concept of a magnetic field. They have a special amplifier over there that converts the sound to magnetic waves. It goes through a wire that's laid around the room, and your hearing aid will pick that up. You can be sitting in the back of that room and hear the speaker in the front just as well as if you were standing next to him, having him talk directly in your ear. There are different types of assistive devices, various receivers that you can wear around your neck, and the lantern around your neck is a loop. So if you have a receiver, you wear the neck loop, turn it on, and whoever has the transmitter for your receiver is going to be able to talk right into your ear as if they're standing right next to you. It's a little bit better than Bluetooth. Bluetooth is kind of a one-on-one kind of a conversation technology, whereas a T-coil can go from one-on-one to a very large area and communicating with a number of people. I have a loop set up in my TV room at home. So you just plug it into the TV, and there's a little amplifier that goes with it, and I can sit, on the other side of the room and hear the TV as if I were right on top of it. So that really is a very important little piece of technology. There's a little handout there about those. You want to hang on to that. If you go to an audiologist with a hearing loss problem, be sure to show them that, and be sure to get a T-coil in your hearing aid. And they also put them in cochlear implants if that wasn't obvious. Okay. There are various other types of technologies that use T-coils. There are FM transmitters and receivers, and they can connect with your hearing aids wirelessly as well. You can again wear the receiver on your chest or around your neck, or pin it to your pocket, whatever it might be. You give a microphone to the person that you're communicating with, your communication partner, and they talk into that microphone. Again, they can be on the other side of the room, and that FM will pick it up and put it right into your ear, again, as if you were standing right next to them, okay? So there are infrared systems that also work the same way. We don't have the infrared system today, but it emits a light beam that carries the sound wave. You need a special receiver for that. And again, they come with neck loops so that you can tie it right into your hearing aid wirelessly. So those are the two big areas, really three big areas of technology that you need to be aware of. There are various spins on some of the systems. FM systems can be used for a large area. The problem is if you walk between the transmitter and the receiver, you block the sound and you don't get anything. The same is true with infrared. If somebody walks in front of that light beam, you're going to lose the sound while they're walking through that light beam. With a T-coil, that doesn't happen. It's not affected by somebody, walking back and forth in the room or whatever. It's a magnetic, invisible field that basically fills the whole room, and it really works tremendously. There are some of the theaters today that have infrared systems or FM systems, and we're trying to do our best to get more to install loop systems because they just work so much better. You can get a loop that's a chair pad. You put it on a seat and sit on it. You plug it into your TV, and you're going to have a much better experience with the TV. You don't need to necessarily loop the whole room. You can make them as personal or as big as you want to make them. And of course, it all depends on the driver. The bigger the driver, the more expensive it becomes. The little TV loop that I have in my house was like about $200. So it's not a tremendous expense, but an expense nonetheless. It's hearing loss is like a lot of other conditions. They cost money to deal with them, unfortunately. So, but there's a ton of technology available today, and Rick and oh gosh, I forgot the name. Thank you. They're going to talk about some specific types of technology in a few minutes. So some other things that I wanted to get to real quick are some communication tips, and you need to be able to understand these tips so that you can develop your own litany, so to speak, of what you need to be able to understand somebody with your hearing loss, okay? And one of the first things is to be in close proximity to somebody. Most people with hearing aids and even cochlear implants have difficulty understanding somebody who's more than 6 feet away, okay? Without assistive technology, if you're more than 6 feet away, the person you're talking to is going to have a lot more difficulty understanding what you say. And it helps also to face the person that you're talking to. Even with low vision, it makes a big difference. If somebody has their back to you and they're talking toward the back wall, I'm standing behind them, I'm not going to be able to hear them. So you want to make sure you get the person's attention, or that they know that they have to get your attention in order to communicate with you. So that's really very important. Those are the two big things. Some other things that I want to share with you: if somebody says something to you and you don't understand it the first time, you can ask them to repeat it. If you don't understand it the second time, don't ask them to repeat it again. ask them to rephrase it, okay? Or say to them, I understand that you said the dog is, and I didn't understand what the dog is. What was that last word? And they'll tell you, black. And if you don't understand it when they say black, you ask them to spell it. Okay? So you can take sentence fragments, give the person who's speaking to you what you understood, and ask them to fill in the blanks. Or ask them to say that phrase differently, so that maybe they'll use some words that are easier for you to understand. Okay? And if you can control your environment, a room with curtains on the windows and carpeting on the floor, the ceiling is good. These acoustical tiles are helpful. But there is, at least to me, there's a bit of an echo in this room because of the windows and the concrete walls and so forth. So I hear the sound bouncing back and forth. If you can cover those with wallpaper and curtains, it just deadens all the sound. It's not bouncing back and forth. If somebody's in the back part of the room having a conversation and I'm trying to talk to somebody up here in this environment, that conversation in the back could well interfere with my conversation in the front. Noise is the absolute enemy, and once you get more than one conversation going at a time, it just complicates everything 100%. You go to a restaurant and all the different conversations, the kitchen noise and so forth and so on. Somebody's got a baby that's screaming. I don't even try to actually talk or listen to my wife when we go out to dinner. Fortunately, we both know sign language, so we're able to communicate that way, which is helpful. But if you get into a restaurant, you want to try and get into a booth with high back so that it's blocking the sound from behind you. If you can sit in a corner, that works out well too. And of course, you want to pick a restaurant that has some drapes or curtains on the wall and so forth. Something more than McDonald's, maybe.
Get all your hacks, Randy?
I'm sorry.
Did you get all your hacks in?
Yeah, I think so.
If you have trouble, if something sounds strange, don't assume that it is strange. You need to ask about it.
Yeah. If that's something else. If you get into a conversation with somebody, ask them right up front, what are we going to talk about? So that you know the subject and you can tune into that and maybe be a little more receptive to the words that would be used in talking about a particular situation, so that if you hear something you don't quite understand, you may be able to make a connection because you know what the topic of the conversation is, okay? So that's always helpful. You really need to be your own self-advocate in any communication situation. Nobody is going to know that you have a hearing loss unless you've got something stuck on the side of your head. And some of the little hearing aids are not even visible, so that is not going to tell somebody that you have a hearing loss. You have to be the one to tell them, I have a hearing loss. I need you to speak slowly and clearly for me, please, if you would. And if they start speeding up and talking 100 miles a minute, don't be afraid to interrupt them and say, hey, wait a minute, you're talking far too fast for me. I can't understand you. I do that on the phone all the time. You got to do what you have to do to be able to communicate with people. And it certainly is something that you can add your own flair to, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm just kind of straightforward with it. You have to be nice. You don't want to offend somebody, because then they're just going to say, oh, heck with you, and they'll walk away. They'll give you a, oh, never mind. I hate that phrase, never mind. My wife pulls that sometimes. But you get this kind of stuff, and even with spouses, my wife and I have been dealing with this for about 30 years, and sometimes she even forgets that she's got to talk slowly, talk clearly, face me. So you need to remind even your spouse and your family as time goes on, wait a minute, I need you to do this for me so I can understand what you're saying. Do it nicely though. Be polite. Don't beat somebody over the head with it. But you need to be your own self-advocate and stand up and tell people what you do need them to do in terms of communicating with you. Take gum out of their mouth if that's, interfering with their speech and you can't understand it and that kind of thing. Okay?
Okay, let's, thank you.
Oh.
I did want to say too that I'm also married to someone who has hearing loss, and I've been dealing with that about 30 years too. So I remember the first time I told him, he had worked in a paper mill, and of course the noise was really loud, right? But I remember the first time I told him that I thought that he had some hearing loss and he should go to an audiologist, and he came back and told me, well, the doctor said there's nothing wrong with me, I'm just wife deaf. So, I mean, I'm just saying that, picking up on what Randy said about, being married a long time. So even when you find yourself doing these things, like, for example, I think being in a car is the worst. There's just no way, because if you think about some of the things that were said here, like face the person. Seems like just in a car it's impossible. Restaurants, Randy mentioned that too, and I think your tips were really good about those restaurants. It's hard to find a restaurant that meets those qualifications. I even was in a restaurant that was designed for acoustics in Berkeley, California about 3 years ago, and I didn't see much improvement over a regular restaurant. But in your own home, regardless of what intellectually you should do and shouldn't do, don't you find yourself sort of yelling at somebody from another room, right? And then, you just kind of do it. You know what, you shouldn't do it, but you shouldn't do it, but you do it. And then the thing, Randy, that I think you said that I was really struck by is that how the person with the hearing loss really needs to be the responsible party, not the spouse or the relative. It's like they have to own the fact that this is their issue and they have to take responsibility for facing the person or asking them to clarify something rather than you as the nagging spouse reminding them. So anyway, but we'll move on. So thank you, Randy. Okay, so number one, I wanted to walk you through these packets. Because one of the things that is in the packet is a 2-page handout that says financial aid resources for hearing aids. So this was completed last year. I'm not really sure it's up to date, but if you look for that handout, one of the things that was in there was the Medicare Advantage programs. So you probably know that ironically Medicare may cover cochlear implants, but it probably doesn't cover hearing aids the same way with glasses and other, CCTVs and all the vision things. They'll do surgery, but they don't tend to cover devices. But the Medicare Advantage programs, as they're currently configured, may cover cost of hearing aids and vision devices. But I'm not sure what's happening to those Medicare Advantage programs. So I think that there are some changes underfoot, so don't assume that, but you may want to call if you need help with hearing aids. So there's a list there. Feel free to call us back. We'll do some research for you on that. And then I kind of wanted to move on to the next part of our program, which is a brief presentation on a technology grant that was recently put into place by the Federal Communications Commission. So Muriel, if you want to come up and talk about your grant. And we'll be available after the presentation to hand out applications and so on. And there's a flyer about this grant in your packet.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Muriel Aparo, and I work with the Department of Rehabilitation Services. I work for the Connecticut Tech Act project. With that project, we have 2 programs, one of which is the grant that Marcia was speaking about. It is a grant for telecommunications. We can help assist you with, say, large button telephones, caller IDs that light up, that give you more visual, they're larger print. This grant is run by the FCC. It's a National Deafblind Distribution Equipment Program. There is a qualification of deafness and blindness, so you have to have the combination of both in order to qualify for the program to start off with. And then we also have the loan program, which would be something, it's a loan interest loan. It's 4.5, either 4 or 4.5%, no higher. It ranges anywhere from $500 to $30,000, and again, this is for telecommunications. So that would be for your like hearing aids, maybe stair lifts in the home, something like that. And that is a loan though, that is not the grant. And I can be here for questions on the grant itself. Again, the grant is for hearing and combination of hearing and blindness. That's it.
Okay, well, we're looking for our equipment here. We're going to have Rick Anders, who is a rehabilitation teacher for our agency, talk about a device called a pocket talker. And I'm going to go and see if I can find one. But in the meantime, there is a little handout in your packet called pocket talker. And in addition, we have 2 phones that we're also going to demonstrate that are available through this Deafblind Technology Grant. And if you're the pocket talker, you have to be a client of BESB, but you can buy them and they're really cheap. And the other phones, they're fairly cheap too. So they're large button phones. So we're going to demonstrate these phones. Unfortunately, we can't plug the phones in. They have to be hardwired, but you can certainly see what they look like. So Rick's going to come up here and demonstrate this pocket talker. And anybody that's a client of our agency who has some hearing loss, you come and see Rick or myself after the presentation. We'll make arrangements to see if we can evaluate you for one. So Rick, do you want to talk about this while we figure it out?
Sure.
I think we replaced that batteries last time around, right?
Well, that's also the roof.
Okay.
The pocket talker comes in 2 versions. One is strictly amplified with the headset. This is partial headset. Basically, you will put it to your ear. The actual headset that comes with it loops over your head and goes to both ears. And with it, I've noticed that people who have hearing aids can find out that that's a little bit more effective than just the hearing aids alone. So it's something that has been effective for people with just a modicum of hearing loss, or somebody that just needs a little bit more augmentation with their hearing aids to hear a little bit better. It's a device that's locally that you can purchase through a catalog. It's about $150, far less expensive than your hearing aids, but it also is something that would be augmented. You can use it for listening in church or listening in a crowd. And again, you can concentrate by being close to the person you're talking to. If you're in a large crowd and there's a lot of people talking around, you're going to have the same problem that other people have with hearing aids, in that your surrounding noise is going to be something that might overpower what's being spoken to you directly. The Pocket Talker itself comes in a little device that's amplifier, microphone, and power supply. And then the headset, this is a sample of it. This is one that you just look over your ear and hold it in place. And then it allows you to, again, listen carefully. This one here, this device, this device is what he was talking about, called, that would connect to your T-coil in your hearing aid. And you would just wear this over your head and plug this into the same microphone base. And what it would do, it would loop it right into your hearing aid so that you'd be able to hear as clear, like you said, as if somebody was right next to you. So it comes in a model with both the hearing aid loop and the headset. It's a fairly simple system and it works really good. Anything else you want to say about this? We do provide it for our clients if they have a hearing loss. So it's not something that you would have to go out and purchase, but if you're not one of our clients, it still doesn't keep you from getting one.
Just one more thing about, in your packet, there's also a list of catalogs. And you can get that Pocket Talker device if you don't qualify for our services through one or more of those catalogs. So, and at this point, I think I will kind of open it up to questions, and I'll just raise your hand and I'll walk around, and then we'll see who needs to answer it. Okay, hold on.
Have you heard of a device called the Comfort Duet, D-U-E-T-T? My mother's audiologist was recommending that.
Okay, Randy, do you know? Did you hear her? Okay, you need to hear. Talk into this a little.
I'm
Okay.
looking for information on a product called the Comfort Duet, D-U-E-T-T. It's an over-the-ear assistive hearing device that was recommended by my mother's audiologist.
Thank you. Randy? Okay.
Sorry, I still didn't totally
Yep,
understand
okay.
you, ma'am.
Wait a minute.
Oh,
The Comfort Duet?
Comfort.
I'm not familiar with that particular device. Yeah, they do kind of get heavy on your ears
Yeah.
sometimes, and that.
Do you know what it does? Let's start there. Do you know what it's intended to do?
When she's not wearing her hearing aid, if she's in the house, it's like a headphone. She can put it over her
Okay.
ears and she can hear.
Oh.
All right. Well,
That sounds
okay, well,
Pocket Talker.
this technology changes quite a lot.
For a mild or moderate hearing loss, those might work okay. If you get much beyond that, then you need to do something a little more serious. But for somebody with a mild or moderate income hearing loss, that seems like a very good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments, anything, anyone?
Are you going to cover all about the vision, is the machines, electronic machines?
Well, I hadn't intended on it, and that's why I said, the question was, am I going to cover electronic machines for vision loss, right?
Right.
Well, I hadn't intended on it because, again, I think the bulk of this presentation was really targeted at people who had vision loss who also had hearing loss. But I'll just say something briefly about that. I think probably what you're referring to are electronic video magnifiers.
Computer screen or whatever.
Computer screen. Okay, I think what you're talking about are devices that we refer to, they're actually electronic video magnifiers. At our agency, we sometimes refer to them as CCTVs, but that's a little misleading because CCTV is more of a generic device that's used, for all kinds of things. But at any rate, but what he's referring to is if you have vision loss, that we have these small handheld video magnifiers, and they also come in inline. Most people these days don't want the inline video magnifiers because they take up more space, but we have smaller ones, and they, and again, in those catalog that I refer to, that catalog page, there's different companies that you can contact for them. For our agency, our budget has been deeply affected, both at the state and the federal level. So we do, for clients of our agency that need one, we evaluate them given some criteria, particularly if you live alone, that makes you, at the top of the list, and we give out donated inline ones. For the smaller video magnifiers, those run, I think, what, Rick, about
$250, $500.
$250 to $300, depending on the name brand. So if you don't qualify for one through our agency, you can get them from a variety of companies. For example, New England Low Vision is one of them. What else, Rick?
It's also the one that was in Cheshire.
Well, that's New England Low Vision,
Still called
right?
New England Low Vision people.
Yeah, we had a wider range of companies locally before, but now we don't.
New England Low Vision sort of took
So,
over.
yeah, Eschenbach is another one that sells.
But they only sell to people that are professional. As opposed
Right. Okay, but at any rate, you can come and talk to me about eligibility, for a device like that. And there definitely are some places where you can go to see about used ones, like Neat Marketplace over at Oak Hill. And you can get on the waiting list for our agency if you're eligible. Any other questions? Sue?
Marcia, I just want to add a comment about...
Hold on.
Okay. Thank you.
Need two microphones.
Okay. I just want to add a comment about the Medicare Advantage plans.
Yeah, thank you.
I know someone who had a particular Medicare Advantage plan that was supposed to cover up to $3,000 for hearing aids. What this person didn't do, and it was being a consumer, I probably would do the same thing. She found out after she purchased the hearing aids that she was supposed to go to a certain provider.
Okay.
So there's usually certain providers that you have to go to, so you need to ask that question, because she wasn't told about that, and she's currently fighting that. So I just want a word of caution.
Thank you. I think that's really good. I mean, as a social worker, I used to feel like in the old days before the internet that I actually knew what I was talking about, but these days, things change constantly. And I think, like I said, we just put together this packet 6 months ago and now already, but I know that some of the insurance companies that offer Medicare Advantage, for example, are no longer offering that program, or at least talking about it. So I would say this: if your main issue is coming up with financial resources for hearing aids, that you need to be very careful, like Sue said, and make sure. And I think that the one advantage was that, I'm trying to think of the name of the company, but different companies in Connecticut offer Medicare Advantage. And that actually is based town by town. So that's almost incredible to think that one town may offer it, another town may not offer it, or offer something slightly different. And some of the other resources for hearing aids include your local Lions clubs. So there again, Randy has spoken to me about this several times, about how that's town by town. So you can live in, I don't know what Windsor does, for example, but you could live in a town where if you go to your local Lions Club, they could pick up a big part of the cost. On the other hand, they might not pick up any of it. So it's just that if you're in that situation, you need to look at all your resources. And the only resource that's really on there that I think is probably totally across the board would be the Connecticut Tech Act project, which, as Muriel explained, is a loan with very short-term and long-term interest, low cost. So essentially, you're just borrowing money and paying it back to purchase the hearing aids at a very fraction of the cost it would be as if you went to a bank or something and took out a loan. The only thing is that I think there are some financial eligibility. No, nothing about that? Okay. All right. So
I do have a question, actually. I think I heard recently that the cost of hearing aids is supposed to be decreasing. Have you have any insight as to what that might be?
Ask Randy about that.
There is some hope.
Oh, yes.
Recently, the federal government passed some regulations and laws with the FDA and so forth that provides for over-the-counter hearing aids. Those hearing aids are primarily for somebody with a mild or moderate hearing loss, something that's not very severe at all. But they're hoping that by making these mild or moderate hearing aids available, that it will drive down the cost of just hearing aids in general. It's really, I think it's a limited effects that it's going to have on the mild to moderate hearing aid level. I don't see that the big high-powered ones or the implants are not going to be impacted by that.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, Randy, but I do have to ask you a question because we all know that there's, pick up any newspaper, look on the internet, there's always all kinds of ads for hearing aids. And so, I'm well aware of the fact that that probably when you say best practice would be to go to an audiologist and have them prescribe the type of hearing aid that you need, and then also maybe you could say something a little more about oral rehab.
Our organization, in particular, Hearing Loss Association of America, encourages you to go to an audiologist, not a hearing aid dealer. If you have a hearing loss, it needs to be properly diagnosed, and you need to have a professional who is going to give you the appropriate guidance for your particular situation. Just so you are aware, these hearing aid dealers that are a lot of times kind of high-pressure people are only required to have a high school education to become licensed as a hearing aid dealer. An audiologist, on the other hand, spends 4 years after earning a bachelor's degree, so they're in school 8 years altogether to learn the practice of audiology. They know what they're doing. Our local chapter in the stores has a relationship with the audiology department and the Student Academy of Audiology out of Yukon. And they are some very bright people, very insightful. One of the girls just last year did a tremendous research paper on listening fatigue. And if you have hearing loss, you'll know it really drains your energy to try and listen to some people. So that was really very interesting. But absolutely recommend an audiologist over a hearing aid dealer, hearing instrument specialist, whatever you want to call them. In terms of oral rehab, once you once you admit you have a hearing loss and you get a device, whether it's an aid or an implant, things are gonna sound differently. And you need to retrain your brain to understand these different sounds that are coming to you now. Unfortunately, hearing aids and implants don't restore your hearing to exactly what it was before your hearing loss occurred. Okay, so you need to go to, I go to a speech pathologist in particular who helps me rehab my hearing. We sit and we go through all kinds of little simple words, 3-4 letter words, ask me to pick out the vowels, and then we do the consonants and all that kind of stuff. It's really beneficial. When I got my first implant in 2009, I was only able to understand about 30% of what people would say to me. I went through rehab for about 1.5 years or so after I had that implant. And by the time I got to that point, I was able to understand 70 to 75% of what people were saying. So it was really a tremendous increase in my speech perception, and I can't encourage you enough to get into a rehab program if you do have hearing loss and you get a device of one sort or another.
One more question about that. So if you go to an audiologist and you have private insurance, probably covers the evaluation, right? But do you know if private insurance or including Medicare would cover subsequent visits?
You can buy some supplement plans and some advantage plans that do provide some coverage for hearing related health services. I know Connecticut just came out with a low cost Medicare Advantage plan that includes $500 in coverage for a hearing aid. They're still not going to get you a whole lot unless you pay out a lot in premium, and what you pay in premium you could probably take and apply it to the hearing aids anyway. But unfortunately, there's just not, even even with private insurance companies, there's not a whole lot of coverage that's available. Our state has a mandate that has been in place since, I think it was either 2000 or 2001, that requires insurance companies to offer $1,000 in coverage for children 12 years and younger. So adults were left out in the cold with that. We did try to expand that several times to include adults or a higher age limit or something, and the legislature just would not go for that. And then all this Obamacare stuff came along, and that just changed the whole field of play. And we have not tried to expand that in the recent past, but we did make an attempt before Obamacare took effect. Okay.
Just one more comment about that too, that I'm aware that there has been, ever since I worked for our agency, effort to try to make Medicare cover low vision services. And the cost of devices like the gentleman mentioned, CCTVs, electronic magnifiers. So I think just recently I read that there's yet another effort going on to amend Medicare to cover those devices. But given the political climate right now, I don't know how much if that's likely to pass. But like everything else, you know, I always say about, you said self-advocate, I would address like what we call systems advocacy or legislative advocacy. You don't know when you write a letter to your, state representative or your senator, you don't know if anyone's gonna read it or pay attention to it. But what you do know is that if you don't do that, they certainly aren't gonna pay attention to the issue. So I always say, if you have an issue that you're concerned about, whether it's your hearing, whether it's your vision, or any other type of issue, be sure and write to whoever, include that, to say, hearing aids are really expensive. What are we talking about here? $6,000 maybe?
At least.
$8,000, for the latest technology. Again, these electronic video, the state-of-the-art ones on the market are probably $3,000. A lot of people can't afford that kind of money, and it's just kind of strange to me that these medical programs will perform expensive surgeries like cochlear implants, but they won't cover the cost of assistive devices that would really improve your quality of life and maybe, reduce the overall medical costs for some of these surgeries. Any final comments or thoughts about any of this? If not, I'd like to thank you for coming, and we are sticking around, so please stick around and we'll be available to answer your questions. And you can try out the Pocket Talker.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.